9:55. We're going to get started. Okay. I'm just waiting for him. Yes, you're welcome. Okay. I'm waiting for you, Adrab. I'm waiting for you. Okay. What? Yeah, he's fine. He already started. Daf Hey and Alf. That's what up to him and Alf the mission. Okay, let's start. It's getting late. Okay, we're going to start from Daf Hey Amud Aleph. In Yetz Hashem, we're going to try to get to Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis, the two dots, if time will allow us. Today's share is Le'elu Nishmas, Rav Aryeh Leib ben Rabbi Saul Minzer, Zeichet Tzadik V'Kodesh L'Vracha. Okay, let's jump right into the Mishnah Daf Hey Amud Aleph that says as follows: Kaisel Chatzer Shenafal Mechayvin Oisel Livnoisei Ad Arba Amas. We're talking about a kaisel already that was once built many years prior, more than Dalad Amas. But now that it fell, Ruvain could obligate Shimon to rebuild the wall until only up to Dalad Amas. Now, Becheska Shenasan, we're talking about a scenario where Ruvain already built the wall and he wants some money from Shimon. So he tells Shimon, please pay me. And Shimon says, I already paid us. We're going to see in the Gemara the exact scenario. The halacha is, Achi Yeviraya Shaloi Nasan, he has a chazaka that he paid Ruvain the money. However, Midalad Amas Vilamalon, Ein Mechayvin Oisim, more than Dalad Amas, even though years prior it was more than Dalad Amas, we're not obligating him to build more than Dalad Amas. Dalad Amas is enough for Hezekriya. However, Samach Loi Kaisel Acher, the second Shimon, which is the neighbor that didn't want to pay more money, he builds a wall parallel, Alpha Pisha Loi Nasan Levis Etikra, even though he did not put on a roof which will make it that the other wall is getting the full benefits. The halacha is Megalgan Olav Esakol, just like we saw in the Mishnah Daf Dalad Amud Beis. And however, there's the Mishnah Becheskas. In this scenario, you have a chazaka sheloi nasan achi yeviraya shenasan. Over there, it's punkfaker. It's the opposite. You don't have if Shimon muns Ruvain to pay. If Ruvain muns Shimon, Shimon has not believed until he could prove it. Zok the Gemara. The Gemara is going to bring a machlokes between Reish Lakish and Abaye v'Rava. If a person is going to pay his chayiv, if a person pays his chayiv before its due date, to make it simple, a person took out alva and he made up. He's going to pay back on the first. The question is, would a person pay before the first or not? So let's see it in the Gemara. Someone let the money made up a time, we're saying it's the first. And the answer is, I paid back before the time. The halach is, Einoi Neman, he's not believed. And Reish Lakish throws in, who should even pay on the first. Forget about paying. Alavai should pay before on the first. On the first, forget about paying before its due date. Abaye and Rava argue, they say, Namri Damri Tavayu, Ovid, Inish, the Parah Bekav Zimne. There is scenarios a person will pay before its time. Zimnin, the Misramale Zuzi. Sometimes he has money unexpectedly. Amar, he tells himself, Ezel Ifra, let me go pay. We're on Hayam at Beis. Ki Hechi, the Loy Litardan, like that. When it comes to first, he's not going to have to deal with it. Let's go. The Gemara is going to bring rayas. The Gemara is going to ask a kasha on Reish Lakish. The Reish Lakish says that a person will never pay before its due date. Frek the Gemara says in our Mishnah, we're talking about the ratio for the first Dalad Amas. Becheska shenasan. Shimon has a chazaka that he paid. Ad sheyevi raya shaloi nasan, until Reuven can prove that he didn't pay. So frek the Gemara, what's the scenario? Hey chidami ilay medam le praticha bezmani. I paid on the due date. Frek the Gemara, pshita that he should be believed. Becheska shenasan. What's the chiddush of the Mishnah? Elalav da amar le praticha b'toich zmani. Elamai the Gemara is thinking that he's tithing. I paid before the due date. So it's a kasha Reish Lakish. We have a bomb raya from Unza Mishnah that a person pays before its time. Fan for the Gemara, no. Shani hacha the chosafa v'safa zimnehu. What we're referring to is when the person approaches him, it says every single layer of the kaisel, he's moneying him for money. Therefore, we're not talking about a scenario where the due date or before the due date b'chlal. Now the Gemara is going to try to bring a raya to a kasha and Abaye and Rava. Raya to Reish Lakish. Abaye and Rava says that a person does sometimes pays before its due date. Zok the Gemara becheskas in the Seifa after the Dalad Amas. The halach is Shimon is not believed to say he paid. Shaloi nasan achi eviraya shenasan. Frek the Gemara, hey chidami, what's the case? I paid on time. Am I lying? Why am I not believed? Our Mishnah says in not believed. We're talking about that he's tiny, he paid before its due date. And the Mishnah says he not believed. Again, for the Gemara, it's not a raya, shani hacha, the amma mi yemer, the mechayv rabbanan. It's not so simple that he's obligated to pay, so he waits and tries to push it off. The Gemara fears Zoyster, a papa of Rav Huna, Bered Rav Yeshua, Avdi Kabai V'Rava. They held like a Kabai V'Rava that a person does pay sometimes before its due date. The Rava, Kabai V'Rava, Ma Rav Ashi, Avad Karish Lakish, and he held like Rish Lakish that there's no such a thing, and we have a Chazakah that a person will never pay before its due date. The Hilchos Karish Lakish, and how powerful is that Allah Vafilu mi asked me, what's the Chiddush about Yisayimim? The Amar, V'Avagav the Amar Mar, even though we know Abal Lifra Minichse Yisayimim, La Yifra El B'Shvuah, that the halacha is when a person tries to take out Yisayimim, when the father was nifter, the person that's trying to take out the money has to make a shvuah. However, in this scenario, chazaka le'avid inish depar b'gav zimne is so powerful, this chazaka, that it's going to pater him to make a shvuah. Okay, now the Gemara is saying the halacha is like Rish Lakish, and we're going to, that there's a chazaka. Now we're going to declare if there's a migu is going to override the chazaka. What is the migu? The migu is that the person didn't approach him on its due date, rather he woke up late, he approached him a few weeks later. Now the person could have easily answered, I paid on the due date, I would have been believed. However, instead of saying that, he says, I paid before the due date. However, we have a chazaka against that. So we have a migu in one direction, a chazaka in the other one. Let's see the Gemara. He manned him after the due date, but he told him that I paid before. That's the Gemara Shiloh. Let's see, the Gemara is going to bring a raya, toshma, Becheska shenasan. Our Reisha says that he have a raya that the chazaka is that he paid. We're talking about the first Dalad Amis. Achi yevi raya shaloi nasa, until he can prove it that he didn't pay. Fraktimar, what's the scenario? Hey chidami. If you tell him that he manned him after its due date, and he's saying that he paid on the due date, pshita, that he should be believed. Why do you need the Mishnah? Rather, we're talking about that he's tiny, he paid before its due date. So it's a bomb raya that we say amigu. Time for the Gemara again, like we saw the Gemara in the Hamid Bey, Shani Hacha, the Chalsaf of Zava Zimniu. Every single layer of the wall is a Nair Chayf. Let's try to bring a raya against Chazaka. Toshma from the Sefer says Midalad Amis Vilamala Ein Mechayv and Oisai. However, Samach like Kaisel Acher Megalgalan all of us are called, and the halacha is Achi Yevi Raish and Nasan, he's not believed to say he paid. I paid during the due date. Why am I not believed? I paid during, before the due date, and that's why I'm not believed. We do not say amigu. And for the Gemara, the same type of text we saw earlier. Shani Acha, it's not a right. Like we said, it's not so simple. The person's thinking that I'm going to be obligated to pay. Let's try to bring one more raya. Amalei Rav Acha Beirei the Rav Ashi Toshma. Let's bring a raya from the following scenario. Manali bi'atcha. A person approaches a person, says, "You owe me $100." V'amalei hin. He's mighty. Says, "Sure, I owe you the $100. I'm going to pay you later." Lamachar. He approaches him the next day. Amalei Tnuli. You even agreed in front of him. You owe me the money. Please pay me. So as follows. If he says, "I paid between the time I was mighty till now," the halach is pater. We're not going to get into pareya. Do you have to do be'edim or not? The halacha is you don't have to return a be'edim. And he says, I don't owe you anything, he's chayiv. And now the Gemara in the Hamina thinks, my loudness satich v'lecha, when I say I gave you money, I paid in time. He's telling me I did not pay on time. I paid before the due date. You see clearly you're chayiv. We have a bomb raya that we do not say a migu with such a stark chazaka. For the Gemara, no, loi, what is the person saying? I don't owe you anything. He's saying, I never borrow for money, and we all know, so he's putting his foot in his mouth by saying, I don't owe you anything, it never happened, and that's why he's chayiv. Now we're going to jump into the Mishnah, where the Mishnah says that the second the person continues to build another wall after he was part of more than Dalad Amis, he's showing a gilui, that he's happy that Reuven built the wall more than Dalad Amis. So the halach is Megalgal and all of us are called. That was the Mishnah. Rav Huna says a chiddush. Amar Rav Huna samach lepalga samach lekula. That means to say is the wall. Taisa says ha lepalga iri bein laich bein legavai. It doesn't make a difference whether it's vertical, the width, as many amas as it is, as long as you started building the kaisel, the halacha is yichayiv on the rest. Rav Nachman, no, there's no indication to tell us that he's going to continue lemay de samach samach, lemay de samach loy samach, and you only chayiv for what you built. However, umayder Rav Huna bekarna belufta, which is a small karen zavis, there it's very clear that I'm not planning and continuing to build more of my wall. Rav Huna avad is mayder that I am potter for the rest. However, mayder of Nachman's mayder the other way around, bafrizo, which is a very thick beam on top of the wall, so it's very clear that you're going to put up a second level. Ubekavasa the shuri, which is cross beams, in a case where you don't put on the heavy beam. In those scenarios, Rav Nachman is also mayder. Omer Rav Huna, another scenario. Beikavi loy have a chazaka. That means to say is Reuven built his wall. He went over to Shimon and said, Shimon, please pay me. Can we continue to build a hamshech? And Shimon says, I don't have any money now. So Reuven already realized that Shimon's going to want in the future to pay him later on for the hamshech of the wall. So he decided to plan in advance. He's not going to want to ruin his wall. He's going to build the wall high, and he's going to build holes for the windows in order that later on, when Shimon wants to build, he's not going to destroy his wall, to weaken the wall by continuing to build. So the halacha is Beikavi, it's still have a chazak of Afa Gav Avalei Himlati, even though he made casings on the window. Reuven could still taina, I did that for the reason because I knew that later on you're going to want to build a hemshech of the wall. When you're going to end up reimbursing me later on, my wall should not get weakened. We're continuing now with chazakas that a person pays to use certain schusim. Amr of Nachman, achzik lehurdi achzik l'shuri. A person approaches his neighbor and said, can I pay you to put on heavy beams on your wall, even though it's going to weaken it? I'll pay you for it. So the halach is, if he paid him for thin beams, achzik l'shuri, because it's much heavier, which causes the wall to weaken more. L'shuri, however, if he paid him for heavier beams, achzik lehurdi, as a chazaka, it's a kol shekain for the thinner beams. Rav Yosef argues, says, no, it doesn't make a difference. A person pays for beams, he's not cheshboning how much weight, he just pays him for him. Achzik lehurdi, achzik l'shuri, whether it's thin or thick beams. Ikadami, it's Rav Nachman himself that said it's not Rav Yosef or Rav Nachman, achzik lehurdi, achzik l'shuri, achzik lehurdi. That it doesn't make a difference. Now we're going to continue another scenario. You have a little shed in the guy's yard, and the water is trickling down to the yard, and he has to pay for that schus. So the question is as follows: Amar of Nachman, achzik lenatfi, where there's no gutter, there's a little water that's trickling in the yard. He paid him for that. Achzik l'shavchi, he also has a chazaka if he paid him for the stronger water where there's a marziv. Rashi says where there's a gutter. However, achzik l'shavchi, if I paid you for the gutter, like achzik lenatfi, because now you're doing much more space around the chutzner. Rav Yosef Amar, Rav Yosef says, I feel achzik l'shavchi. Achzik lenatfi, and Ikadami, same concept, instead of Rav Yosef, it's Rav Nachman, or Rav Nachman, achzik l'shavchi, achzik lenatfi, that you have a chazaka for both. However, he throws in that achzik lenafshi, achzik l'shavchi, if you have a chazaka in a place where there's no gutter, trifa d'orvni loy. What's the case of trifa d'orvni? Is you have a bunch of twigs, and what happens is the water gets concentrated, and then it throws out the water, so it's a much heavier spray. That, he wants to say, he's mighty, you don't have a chazaka. Rav Yosef argues and says, afilo trifa d'orvni, that you have a chazaka as long as you paid for it. Ovid Rav Yosef taka uvda betrifa d'orvni. Let's go weiter. Omer Rav Nachman, Omer Ravua, Hamasker, Bais L'Chavera, Warn Vava Mebeis, Da halach is Bebirak Doilo, Mishtamish, Bezizel, Bekaslea, Adal Ramis, Uba Oiva Kaisel, which means to say as follows. You had a big motel-style house. You had in front of it, you had two nice, beautiful gardens to the main entrance, and every little unit had a place where there was a plank for wood, they had a bunch of crevices, places to put in stuff, and the top of the kaisel, the thickness. The halach is able to use all those cases, whether it's the crevices, whether it's the thickness of the wall, whether it's the kaisel. B'makom shenagu has to be the place. Aval b'tarbetz apteni loy, the garden in front, which is the beautiful entranceway. There, avad you don't have a schos loy. Rav Nachman didei am afilu b'tarbetz apteni have a schos. However, chavish acharei batim, their backyard loy v'rabah am afilu chavish acharei batim, you have a schos to use it. We're going to continue with the schusim of Tashmish. Amr Avhuna, Hai Kashur de Metalasa. A person, Reuven, sees a Shimon suddenly put on a beam against his wall. The halach is, Talsi Yayim Elayv Chazaka. He's not going to be Meiche, because he's going to say, well, I'm not covered in, Rashi says. Up to 30 days, the person's not makbid. Basra Talsin Yayim, after 30 days, oh, Ave Chazaka, because the person's makbid. However, we eat sukkah. Now, sukkah is something they kept on year after year. If you learn Mishnah sukkah, you see that. It was something that was long term. The mitzvah achev yaimin, 7 days lavdavka, some chastayr chutzlaretz. But the point is, after Yom Tov you have a chazaka, live a chazaka, but basa sheba yaimin, after Yom Tov you have a chazaka. However, in all these scenarios, vichavra betina, the second you put on cement, plaster, whatever it is, you're doing something in ma'aseh kavua, it's pasha la'al to have a chazaka. Abai continues, says, the halacha is as follows. You have two houses, shnei batim b'shnei tzidei reshus harabim. You have house A on one side, house B on the other side, and a beautiful reshus harabim going in between them. The halacha is, ze oisem makah lechetzi gaga. Each one Reuven makes a makah for half the size of the roof. Ze oisem makah lechetzi gaga. Ze shaloi keneged ze. Not facing each other. Like that, you're accomplishing that they both can't see each other, umadif, and you overlap. It's a machlekes in the Rishonim if it does the job completely or not. But the point is, it doesn't make sense for one person to lay out the money for the wall completely. That's stam, it's not fair. For both of them to do the wall completely, stam, wasting money. So we're trying to find a pshara. Like that, they do half-half and it overlaps. So frak the Gemara, why do you have to come into Rishus Harabim? Ma'ir Rishus B'Rishus Harabim. Afilu Rishus HaYachid Nami. Even if the place was Rishus HaYachid, it would also be chayiv to build a makif. And for the Gemara, the chiddush is Rishus Harabim. It's the chlei that what? Now the tema name alei ketayne tem. Soif habayli it's a nuim ibnei Rishus Harabim. What's the difference with me? You have a whole Rishus Harabim seeing your roof. Kamashmal and the amalei ketelim. Rabim b'yamam chazali. During the day, lav dafka means light versus dark. It means the concept of the day hours. There's a lot of people, but laila l'chazali, there's many hours throughout the 24 hours. Then no one sees me. However, you're always on the rooftop. Another teretz is, inami rabim ki kamina, when I'm standing, because I'm on a height. So it's only when I'm standing, the Rishus Rabim can see me. Chazali ki asivna, however, when I'm sitting down, because of the height difference, lechazali. However, you, chazali ben kamina, whether I'm standing, ben ki asivna, whether I'm sitting. Rabim, and other nakudi you could tell them. Ki ma'ainu chazali, they have to look up, they have to make a conscious effort to look entire on the roof and see a person. If they're minding their own business and they're sticking to the road, they don't see anybody on top. By default, nami chazisli. Now, frekting more kasha. If that's what we just said, frekting more pshita. What else do you want? Then for the Gemara, we're talking about a scenario as follows: Reuven went and started building half the wall. Now the tema name let the other person tell. Shimon could tell Reuven. Shkol is Nika. Rashi says it's the Yitzias. No problem. Pay the expenses. And not only that, it makes more sense. We're both going to benefit. Like we all know in construction, the bigger the job, if it's one job, it comes out cheaper. Why do two separate small jobs? Kamash Malan that Reuven tells back Shimon, my time, at my time, why didn't you build a wall? You know why? You're weakening my wall. I don't either want to destroy the wall. Every time I continue building this wall, it does more and more damage. Let's go weiter. Rav Nachman Amashmol Gag Hasamuch Lechotze Chaveiro. You have a roof which is samuch to your friend's chotze. The halacha is Oiseloi Makah Gavoy Dal Amis. Let's not get confused with the Hilchos Makah. That's only 10 tvachim in Atayra. Here Rahani Dal Amis. Aval Ben Gag LeGag Loi. Between rooftop to rooftop, you don't need. We already saw this in Gimel Amana off the top of the Amid. Rav Nachman Didei Amar Ein Zakuloi LeDal Amis. However, Zakuk LeMechitzas Hasara. You need to put a wall that's 10 tvachim high. Frek the Gemara, why do they need 10 tvachim l'mai? Ila has a kriya. Then Allah is arba amas binun. Ila nit was all of keganet. If you're doing it, that Reuven doesn't jump into Shimon's rishos. B'misebas ba'amasagi. It's good enough to put a boundary markers. You don't need so high. Ila gdim itlaim. If it's for the goats, for the animals, for the kids, and everything. B'chdei shalei zdakir b'vas roivsagi, which is only a measurement of gimel tvachim. Fan for the Gemara, la'ilam, the nitvas, all of keganim. The reason why you're doing it is that Reuven shouldn't go into Shimon's backyard, but Mesepas. However, when it's only 10 tvachim, when it's only the boundary markers, he's able to tell him, and we see in the parentheses, Amar, Memtsuri Kamatsirna, and the Rabbeinu Chananel says, Shiyapel Atzma Gag Shechavera, he plays shtick. He drops something and he goes right in, he picks up something, and he's able to hop right into Shimon's backyard. However, b'mechitza sasara, now that it's something very tall, it's not so simple. You have to show real intent by going into your neighbor's backyard. Frankly, Umar, is this true? Oh, it says Einis Kakin Loy, and we're thinking minus Kakin Loy, Lav Einis Kakin Loy, Klal. And you, Rav Nachman, say need 10 tvachim. Then for the Gemara, Loy Einis Kakin, the Chiddush is for the Dalan Amis, Avon Einis Kakin, the Mechitza Sasara, Avadi need 10 tvachim. Itmar, Shtei Chatzera, Zul, Malam Zu. In our Tro, it's a little more common. You have Chatzer, Aleph, even here maybe in Haverstraw, certain places where there's real mountains, extreme mountains, is that one neighbor's Chatzer is on the bottom, then there's a tall retaining wall, and then there's Chatzer B on top. The halacha is as follows. Amr Avhuna, Tachton, Boine Mekineg Devaila. Up to the, let's call it that it's 10 feet high. Chatzer Aleph, there's a retaining wall 10 feet. And you have to make a foundation of a wall 20 amas, or 10 feet plus dalat amas. The halach is the tachton has to lay out the money for it to build a wall for the bottom. And he only has to build from his space on top. Pardon? No, wherever the Elyon stops. So let's say wherever your chutzner is, you have a retaining wall. How high the retaining wall is, now it's my ground. From where my chutzner begins, I have to pay the rest. That's Rav Huna. Rav Chizda argues. Rav Chizda says, Elyon misayem lamatu bayni. You have to chip in 50-50 for the guy in the bottom. I'm going to bring it right to this tiny kavas. Rav Chizda shtei chatzer zulam alam zu. This scenario. Lo yimar Elyon. Hareini bayni mekonegdi v'ayla. Ela the Allah is misayem lamatu bayna. He has to build from the bottom. However, ve'emay sechatzer lamalo migago shechaver in izakukloi. We're talking about where your chutz is on a very steep hill. So Chutzer Aleph starts very equal ground to Chutzer B, then it goes down. The halach is in such a scenario, I'm not mechuyev because we both have equal hezek riyah. The Gemara is going to talk about scenarios. We're going to go through a Maisa right now with two brothers. Chama, yeah, we're going to go through four Maisim. Four Maisim there of Chana. Four Maisim, we're going to see the halachas like the first three, not like the case of Shoiver, not like the fourth, and we're going to see why not. Let's go through Maisim of Rav Chama that he said, even though the person's acting not the nicest, not a lot of love going on between these stories, the halach is he has a right to do that. Let's see it inside. How to betray the Havidayah? Rashi says we're talking about a case where there was two brothers, and they split it, and one got the top floor, one got the bottom floor. Chad Havidayah Loi, one was living upstairs, floor B, we'll call it the Chad Havidayah Tasai, one was living on floor A. Isfer Tasai, especially in those days, the foundation was very weak. The bottom floor started sinking. Amalei Tasai Loi. Floor A told floor B, let's go build it. It's hard for me to get in. I have to bend down to get into my own house. Amalei, the floor B, his brother told him, I know Shapika Derina. I don't even know why you're bothering me. I'm happy the way I'm going. Amalei, he saw who he was dealing with. He said, I'll pay for the demolition and rebuild it. What can I tell you? Amalei, I have nowhere to live. So Amalei, I'll put you up in a beautiful Hilton. Amalei Tarachna, I'm not interested in moving out of my house. So he answered back, I'm not going to have anywhere. What do you want from me? I have nowhere to live. So he answered back, get on your belly button to get into your house. I don't care. Bug off. As much as he's not nice, he has a right. The Hani Miller of Chama throws in 2 points. We're talking about it floor B didn't enter the airspace of floor A, 10 tvachim. Floor A could tell floor B, you're any my rishus v'loy meshabalach, and therefore you have to. It's going to end up coming out. They're going to have to share all the expenses. So if he's very smart, he shouldn't wait till it gets to such an extreme. Another point is they didn't make a tanai with each other, and we're going to see exactly what the tanai is. Once they made a tanai before, and the two brothers, the halach is sasi uvani, you have to taka split the cost of the demo and rebuilding. So, well, you're going to have some liberal tell me climate change and everything, the stuff I'm moving a tiny bit. What is going on until how much? Amar Rabbanon, Kamei de Rava Mishmei de Marzut Shabei de Rav Nachman, the Amar Shmei de Rav Nachman, he says in the name of Rav Nachman, Ka'oisus Shanina, like we're going to see later on in the Masechta, that Rumai Kechetzi Arkoi V'Chetzi Rachba, which means to say it's by the Heichal. It's 40 by 20, we chop it off into 2, 40 is 20, 20 is 10, it makes it into 30 the height. Didn't I already tell you? Don't put empty barrels in the name of Rav Nachman. He never said this. Rav Nachman, this is Rav Nachman said, Ki diary inchi. Like the regular person lives. The kama, how much is that a regular person? Ki hechi. The ailis is raisa, the mechuzah. The person can come with a bundle, mechuzaisa, and go whether verticals or shaila or not. Rashi says at least go all around. That's good enough. That's enough to live. That's Maisa A. We're going into the second incident with Rav Chama. Who gabed avibani ashisa? Person built a wall achayir kaver the chaver in front of his window of his friend. Now he has a taina. Amalei kamafel salah. You're causing me you're taking away my light, which is a valid taina. Amalei, no problem. Sacharna lach hacha. I'll close up the window. Vavin lach kavi le'el mishasai, and I'm going to build up windows higher up. Amalei, I don't want that. Kamar salei l'shasai. You're weakening my wall. So Amalei, no problem. I'll close up the windows and I'll build a brand new wall and extension on top. I'll put up new windows on top of the older wall. Amalei, no, you had a valid tiny back. When the top wall is extension and it's newer. On the bottom of the wall is old. Like Kayama, doesn't stand as strong. I'll put a whole brand new wall. I'll put the windows where you want them. No, again, another taino. Like Kayama. If you have one wall that's older, and the rest of the one wall that's newer, and the rest of the house, all 3 walls are old, it doesn't stand. Amalei, I'll put you a brand new house. Based, I guess the guy monopoly money. I'll replace it with the windows. Amalei again, Leslie Duchter Lamedaba, I have nowhere to live. Amalei, I'll put you up in the brand new hotel or new place. Amalei Tarachna, I don't want to leave. Amar Chama, the Zak say Maisa b'din kama Akiv. Frekti Gemara Hainu Ach. What's the difference with the Maisa with the 2 brothers versus this scenario where the guy's blocking the window? It's the same concept. Vasu Lamali. For the Gemara, Kamash Malon, the what, the Afagav, the Loy Mishtamish. What is this second scenario talking about? Elatavno Beitziva, he's using it for Tevin and firewood. And the Kamash one is, he's not interested in removing those firewood. It's such a big chiddush, he doesn't have to. And again, I'm assuming you had the windows over there, you needed the light in order, otherwise it would rot, etc. Another Maisa, third Maisa, Hanabe Trey Achi, the Palgi Bahadi Adadi. Another Maisa with Yerusha, 2 brothers split up a property. Chad Matias Plido, one took a mansion, Chad Mati Tarbitza, one took the garden in front of the mansion. Ozal Hu the Mati Tarbitza, the one who took the garden, what did he do? Bani Ashisa, Apuma Das building. Well, he went and built a wall, totally blocking the view of the mansion. You're darkening my light. I don't know what you want from me. It's on my property line. Amar Rav Chama. Bedin Karmele. Amalavina Lavashi, Maishno had the Tana. What do we learn? We have a Bryce Session, Achashokhu, 2 brothers that split. Echamam not the Sada Karim, one took the vineyard. Echamam not the Sada Love. And the Loch is the Eshel Abala Karim, Dal Amas. Like we saw them Bezim and Alpha, Mechitzas Karim, Shinifert, so the same concept without a kite, so we need Dal Amas. There it says to do with Kalayim, but over here, every animal, in order for the animals to go back and forth, you want Dal Amas. However, when the Loch is, he gets it. Dal Amas, Besad the Love. And where's the Dal Amas? The place is from the Sava Love. And why Shamanaskan and Chokah? That's why they split it up. Amalei Hasam Dala Dadi. There they made the cheshbon. It didn't make sense if it's $1,000 and you're going to take away 4 amas from me. It's already not worth the split. Abel Hachamai Dadi. They didn't make up a split. The Chibu Shutani Eskina. We're talking about Shaitim. The high shokel. I split the high shokel tabitza v'loy ali la dadi. Avada they made the cheshbon and he paid it for the difference. They ended up making the cheshbon, but the bay livni kashuri v'hudri. They ended up for the materials, for the beams and everything else. But the me'avir loy ali la dadi. They didn't cheshbon the me'avir of. Elemi kara spilled up pagusli before I split up a mansion. Hashta mashusli draina. Now you give me some dark room. I can't call this a mansion. Amar Simi Barbashi no. Shmo ba'alma publicly. Me loy Tanya. Why can't he Tanya? Shmo ba'alma, which means to say we find this in a concept. In Bomitzia, I'm selling you a base core which makes 30 saw. Even though it's only 15, which is half. It's a good sale. He sold him the name. But the miscreant, this is the punchline, it has to be called, the Velt calls it a base core. Another concept, remind him, even though it doesn't have remind him, that Allah is a giyai. The miscreant, the same thing with the vineyard. Karamani Michalach Apishen Kafanim doesn't have vines, a giyai. Again, it's a good sale. Shalai Machala Shma V'hu the mystery karma. Found for the Gemara, no, me dami hasa machamal Michala Kayach, no problem. Shma Zavinalach, I got it. I should have made my due diligence, but I bought it for the name. Hachi Matzi Amarle, the 2 brothers could tell each other, Daiti Dachi Palki. This is why I did it. Did Darina Beki, Hechi did Daravason. Just like the father had a beautiful mansion with light, that's what I want. Amrule, one Zainam at Beis, Maria Nuko, Markashusha. Taisus explains that the opposite direction, that the father was old, that's why he's called Hua Gadol Hashem Shenoila Bianugusa of Chizda. It's the opposite of what we think. They hold, Rab Chama is going like himself. Rab Chama was from an Ardai, and he's like his own Shita. Rav Nachman, Shmuel. We have 2 brothers that split up with their father's properties. The Allah is even though the father did have a derech, once they split up, it goes away. Mamish, our case with Chachalainos, the case where they need ladders, the case where there's irrigation. Even though the father used that irrigation, the halach is you don't have it. And make sure that taka, that's the halacha. Rava argued, he said, yesh land. So it's them litamayu. There's a machlokes. What happens with the father? Do they get the same schusim or not? We're going to see the last case of Rav Chama of the 4th scenario. Who started the Yasmi de Nafakalat? What's the scenario? The case is as follows. Reuven was alive. He went over to Shimon. He asked him for his money back. Shimon told him, I'm sorry, right now I'm struggling. A few days later, Shimon died. Reuven died, not the Bachayv, Reuven died. So Shimon, son of the Simon, come over to Shimon, says, you owed my father money. And suddenly, out of nowhere, he pulls out a receipt that he paid. So it's highly suspicious, this case.